from this hideous state into a beautiful state that is polished and whatever else. Before I do that, I just want to show how we can do texture type things too, just so you can see it. We'll get more into it as the semester goes on. You don't have to add any textures to your room apart from these flat colors, but people want to know how to do this. Inquiring minds want to know. You guys ever heard that saying? Yeah? Okay. So I'm old, just not that old. Good. Okay. All right, so this is my picture frame, right? I want to put a picture on the picture frame, or this is my TV. I want to put a movie on my TV, whatever it is. First thing you have to do is find a picture. I don't know why I go to YouTube. I would just type in here. Awesome photo. There we go. That's beautiful. An awesome photo. Oh, wait. Hold on a second. Who is awesome? You're awesome. Okay, now typically we would not steal somebody else's work, right? So this is Land Lin G Laurel L Graphics, awesome picture by Elizalette Jefferson. Okay, so we don't want to steal somebody else's artwork. This is somebody else's. If for some reason you are at a company doing anything at all and you happen to just grab anyone's artwork and you drop it into their work and that ends up going anywhere outside the company, typically that could end up in a lawsuit, loss of money for the company, loss of a job for you, okay? So we don't want to steal any artwork. Me grabbing this image, even though Google had it, is stealing. You can't do that, okay? There are resources available. Textures.com, super easy to remember because it says textures.com, has a bunch of pictures. They have a picture of a silverback gorilla that we will use. That's not a silverback. There we go. Where did my gorilla go? There he is. Gorgeous. Okay. Keep in mind proportions, right? If I have a portrait style picture frame, I basically want to find a portrait style picture. If I have a landscape picture frame or a TV, I want to find a landscape picture. All right. So this one is great. Let's grab that one. All right, so these are all free. These are free textures for you to download, and they're royalty free, so you could use them if you're working at a company or whatever. You do have to create an account, so I would recommend on your to-do list this extended weekend is to get an account for textures.com. The account is free. You can download 15, you get 15 credits a day, however that equivalates to stuff you can download. This picture is 2 credits. That picture is 1 credit. Different resolutions are more credits. If you get a Premiere account, then you get 100 credits a day or something like that, which is typically a lot of stuff you download. All right, so I'm going to download this smaller one in case I decide that I need more credits later. And I'm going to put this into my folder. So I'm going to go to where I have my stuff saved. 2510. Miniroom. Cool. So remember the Miniroom? We had folders that we created like years ago. One of those folders is textures. This is a texture. I would paste it into that folder. Okay. Now for this assignment, we can kind of ignore some of the bigger things that we would have to set up on this. Typically, if you're going to put a texture in your assignment today, you'd be rendering today, and then it would just be going out. So it's not necessarily something you'd be constantly working on this project. When we get to later assignments, we'll be opening up Cinema, working on stuff, closing Cinema, coming back the next day, opening it, working on stuff, taking it home. Okay? So I'll show the steps that we need to do always, but you don't have to worry about the first step of it. Okay? The first step I do whenever I get a texture is I go to my preferences. So I go to Edit Preferences, and I go down to Files, and I have to tell it where my textures are. Okay? This is a stupid thing that they have in here, and some programs do not have this, like the world's greatest one, Maya, but we'll just deal with it. All right. So I'm going to say that for my textures, I'm just picking on the Miniroom. Okay? Now it should be a little bit happier when I start putting textures on here. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to double click this so I can see it. Okay, now here's the magic. Do you see where we have a texture button? I click that big button. It doesn't look like a button, but it is. There's no wording. Then I would go to there. There it is. All right, so now that monkey, the gorilla, is on that picture. I can have some reflection on there. So if this is a picture frame and I want it to look like there's glass in front of it, I would have reflection. Okay, so I'm going to leave some reflectance on there, and I'll even just turn it back to the default and change the width of this a bit and change that a bit. So what this should do is give it more of like a highlight, just like a single dot highlight, as opposed to like a spreading out of a highlight. That should be it. Yep. Okay. Name this gorilla texture. All right. So now it's just the same thing that we've done before. I'm just going to grab that face, grab my gorilla texture, and just drop it on there. There he is. Okay. Now he's not being laid out correctly. What's happening is it's stretching my gorilla picture to fit that image. Okay. Now up here on that cube, which is right here, remember we had the little triangle tag? Okay, that's our selection mask. Yes. We have our texture tag, which is right here. That guy right there has a way of how to control how it's projecting. Okay? So imagine my projector up here is actually shooting that image onto the picture frame. Okay? Right now it's not. Right now it's just like stretched and distorted. So I want to change how it's projecting. So if I say flat, it does that. That doesn't look right. If I say cubic, hey, that looks better. If I say frontal, now it's a bit closer. So all of these are different ways that we can control how it's being projected. So the idea is to find the one that's going to look the best on it. Okay. So for this one, it looks like cubic worked, or frontal. Now with either one of these, you'll see that it doesn't give me exactly what I want. His proportions are not the same proportions as the original picture, right? So the original picture may have been more square, and this is more rectangle. So that's why it's doing what it's doing, where I have these lines on the side where it's basically tiling that picture. So if I want to, I could turn tiling off, and that'll get rid of the two on the side. That's a possibility. The other thing I could do is come down here to these other options and start to specify maybe the length of the U is 110 and 110. Okay, so you see how that like stretches it out? So maybe like 150 and 150. And then I can do an offset. Oops, the other way, the other way. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now I'm kind of fitting it to that spot. There are other ways that we can fit this better. Okay, we can tweak it more. We're beginners. This is how we can do it. Just play with those settings until you get it. Typically, you're just going to play with projection, which one of these, and then these four up top here. Okay, so those are the only four you really need to play with. For this assignment, you don't necessarily have to worry about doing the preference thing, because basically if you do add a texture today, you'll be rendering it out today, and then it'll be done. You'll never have to open this project again and look at it. Okay? All right. Cool. And then obviously I would add a texture to the wood frame around it. All right, so our scene is going to need some lights. Light bulb right there. So I can hold this down just like everything else, and I can pick what kind of lights I want in the scene. Again, we'll go over these more in depth, but for now we're just going to keep them simple. You can pick two lights, either the point light or regular light right there, or this area light. Okay? You could do a spotlight too. There are certain circumstances you may want a spotlight, but any one of these three is acceptable for this assignment. Okay? Just so you see what they are, a light is basically just like a light bulb. It's a point in the middle of our area, and it just spreads out and shines all over the place. Okay? It's a very good light for interiors because it just lights everything up. Okay? When we render stuff, we hit Control R. That allows us to see it in our view. All right? There's another way we can render stuff. So if I hit Control R, what happens is wherever I'm at, that's what it's rendering exactly into this view. But the second I move this, there's my monkey, by the way. The second I move this, it goes away. So now I'm back to not having that render view there. The other one is Alt-R. Oops, not Alt-R. I lied. The other one is Shift-R. That's what it is. Shift-R actually opens up a separate window. Now I can see what the rendering is going to look like. Okay? So typically if I have two screens, this window is on my other screen. That way I can see what my renderings look like. Why this is awesome is because we can actually go through and it'll save each rendering that we do, and then we can see what changes happened. Okay? What I mean by that, let me scoot this guy down for a second. Scoot it back up for a second. If you look at it, there's no shadows, right? Lights should have shadows by default. No lights have any shadows at all, so we have to turn that on. You'll also notice that the light bulb itself, which is about here, is not showing up. They don't. By default, they don't show up. Okay, so I'm going to click on the light. I'm going to just go to Shadows. And I'm just going to turn this to Shadow Map Soft. And the Shadow Map Resolution, I'm just going to put up to 1000. Okay, Shadow Map Soft. The map is 1000. I come over here, and I just hit... that button. So now I have shadows. You can see the shadow there on the wall, the shadow by the chair on the desk. This is a good time to go through and make sure that stuff is actually touching what it should be touching. If I see a huge shadow behind my picture frame, it probably means that my picture frame isn't touching the wall because there's too big of a shadow. If this here has a huge shadow or there's a gap, look at my chair, you can kind of see there might be a little bit of a gap between my chair leg and the floor. I just want to go over there and tweak it. Don't spend hours and hours, refining it so that it's exactly right on the floor. Even if it sticks through, we can do that, okay? But now look at, here's the before, here's the after, okay? Makes a huge difference just having that shadow in there, all right? I may want to adjust the shadow. So if I click on the light again, I can say I want to take that density down. Maybe I want to change the color of it. There you go. So now it looks like it's a little bit softer shadow in the room. Now you'll see how these areas here are completely black. Okay? So this is another thing that happens in 3D. I have, pretend this is a solid object. I have a light here. That light is going to shine on the surfaces that it sees. Anything else, there's no light attached to it at all. Right? So in the real world, what would happen?
Light would reflect off the object.
Right, it would bounce around. The light would hit this wall, and that wall's color would then flood onto this. Okay? That doesn't happen in 3D by default. If it did, these renderings that are taking, if you look at the time right there, 2 seconds, would probably take 10 seconds, 20 seconds, sometimes 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes hours. Okay? When you look at Disney movies or Pixar movies, some individual frames, one frame of a movie can take 3 days to render out, just because of how much stuff is inside that one frame. Okay? So, for now, all we're going to do is we're going to cheat, and we're going to push this light back here. I'm going to hold Control and pull this light way there. Okay? Remember, Control duplicates. So if I click on this light, there we go. You can see I have a light here and a light there. So I'm going to go back to that, hit Shift-R. So now I have a little bit of light here, and I have a little bit of light there. Now it's looking a little bit better. My walls, though, however, have gotten blown out because now I have two lights in my scene that are just like overpowering. So now I'm going to start to balance my light intensity just so it doesn't blind anyone. General, there we go. No, basic. That's right. Oh, this is covering it. Alright, so I'm just going to take this intensity down to maybe 63 for light. And then maybe 17 or 20 or 30 for that one. Okay? There's no magic numbers. Don't try to copy my numbers. My numbers aren't going to work for every single scene. The bigger your scene, you're going to have different light settings. That's the way it goes. I'm going to adjust my light some more. Pull that one up. And this is why I typically have it on the other screen, so I don't have to keep moving it up and down. All right, that looks sufficient there, except for the crud that's on my desktop. All right, so that looks cool. All right, so without adding the texture, all we've done so far is created a light, turned shadows onto soft, and then duplicated it and kind of balanced it out so we have plenty of coverage in our scene. The next thing I want to do is create a camera. So under the camera button, I created a camera. Now, I'm not looking through the camera, okay? The second I created this, oops, right there, it just exists, okay? I'm not actually looking through the camera to set it up. When I click on this button, now I'm looking through the camera, okay? Just right here under camera. And then you click that little, it's black, and then you click that button and then you get right into it. So now as I move around, I'm actually moving through the camera, okay? I can't zoom in and out. I don't know why I can't zoom in and out. Why don't you let me zoom in and out? Oh. The stupid feature of it, I have to deselect the camera before I can start moving in and out. I don't know why that is. Whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up what I want my rendering to look like, okay? Do you remember probably the first day, we talked about resolution? We talked about how it doesn't matter what the resolution is inside 3D because we can always change that resolution at the very end, okay? So right now we're rendering it out, and it's, if I hit Shift R again, you can see, this is what our frame is going to look like. That's what our resolution is going to look like. Now, if I'm doing something for a widescreen movie, that doesn't look like it's widescreen. It looks like it's very 4:3, right? Like the old-fashioned TV systems. So I need to set that up to say, this is a widescreen presentation. So these are your render buttons. So this one renders it to your viewport, to your view. This one renders it to the picture viewer, which I just had up. And then this is your render settings. So if I go to my render settings, I can change that resolution. So if you have your cheat sheet out, what's our resolution we render stuff at? Nope. Look under the movie section. 960 by 540. Okay, that is half of 1080p or 1080. So that's why I was close. All right, so we're rendering this at 960 by 540. The resolution here doesn't matter. This could be 72. It could be 7 trillion in 2. It doesn't matter. I don't know if it will actually render that, but it doesn't matter. This is only if we're printing it. Okay, so later on we're going to get to stuff that we actually would want to print out. All those pictures you see up there were stuff that we wanted to print out. So to make it easier for us, we can specify, and you can see it from the drop down, we can specify inches and a resolution so that we do get a nice print. So if I want an 8x10, I would do an 8x10 at 300 dots per inch, okay? Or I could just type in 3000 by 2400, whatever. These settings should be fine. You'll see it automatically defaulted to HD TV, which is that 16:9 format, which is the widescreen format. My frame range, I will set later. After Cinema has a stupid thing where I can't set this until I'm really ready to go, and then I can do it. Otherwise, it's just going to do it right now, okay? So I leave that alone. I'm going to come back later and say that I want to render out my 90 frames. Right now, I'm just going to leave it. All right, so I'll leave that alone. Cool. So now when I hit Shift R, see the format difference between the two? Okay, so you should be aware of that as you start working on your stuff, or when you start rendering your stuff, that, hey, this doesn't look right when I'm here, right? That looks too square. Something's wrong. All right, I gotta set my settings. There it is. Typically, I do a check. Right before I render, I'll do a check. I'll render out some stills just to see what things are looking like. And then right before I actually do my final render, I'll go through again and just double check all my settings just to make sure. All right, so that's cool. Now I need to render out my animate my camera. One thing that changed, my pointer's not there. It may be hard to see for you, but do you see the difference in color right there Do you see how that's like a little bit brighter and that's a little bit dimmer? That's what's going to render, okay? Whatever is inside that box is going to be our frame. So what that means is, let's pretend I have my camera right here. If I lined up that edge with my, I'll line up with this side actually, with that front edge right here, what should happen when I hit my render button is my camera edge cuts that off, okay? Haha. Perfect. That's what we want, okay? We want to know exactly what's going to render. You ever see in the behind the scenes stuff, the guy walking around with a little viewfinder so we can see what the shots are going to look like? That's what we're doing here, is trying to figure out what we want to do. And by looking at these little grayed out areas, we can see exactly what's going to be framed. So anything inside those grayed out areas or in between them, that's what's going to be in our view. So when we do this, we never want to start off in 3D telling people, hey, this is 3D, right? If you don't have a world, don't show the world, okay? What I mean by that is don't show all this empty space out here, because anyone will be able to say right away, hey, that's 3D. There's nothing else around there. Obviously, this is 3D. We're not at the stage yet where it's going to look super realistic. But this here is going to look a lot better than what we just saw. Now we feel like we're actually in a room. We don't know what else is out there. This could be an entire building. We're only seeing one room of this. Okay? So, our first spot of the camera that we want to do. Simple. Everything is going to be simple, okay? Nothing crazy. I will show you crazy after. We want to set up just a basic camera move. Animation in After Effects is, or in Cinema is pretty easy. You just have to know where to click. So on my camera, I'm going to be moving around, position, and rotation. Those HPR is rotation, or HPB. You see RRR and then PPP. Those are position and rotation. These here are how I set keyframes. This is my timeline. So basically I'm going to say, here's my start point, here's my end point, and then I will set keyframes at both of those of what I want to happen. So at 0, I want my camera to be right here. Actually right here. I'm going to zoom in really close to the desk. I'm going to deselect my camera so I can actually zoom in. Come on. You may have to click on an object and hit O to get over there. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to click on my camera. I'm going to set my position and set my rotate. I don't have to click any of the buttons. I just basically click and drag straight down that list. And then the position items get keyframed and the rotation items get keyframed. Then I'm going to go up to 90. And I'm just going to deselect the camera again. I'm going to zoom out. And maybe come over here and show that. Grab the camera again. Highlight, highlight. Notice the color. These are like a reddish pinkish color, like a dark salmon. When I'm off of those keyframes, now they're like open rings, okay? When I'm on, the keyframes are filled in. When I'm off, the keyframes are hollow. So that's important to know, because if I ever want to edit a keyframe, I need to know that. So there's my animation. See how simple it is? Nice and smooth. One spot to the other spot. That's all you have to do. Now let's look at a crazy camera, because people will turn in crazy cameras. They do every semester. Oops. I'm going to deselect the camera. I'm looking through it. And here is a crazy camera. And they say, I want to show this off. So I grab that. I'm at frame 0. I set keyframes. And then I go to, let's say, 20. I want to show off my desk. Go over here. I'm going to grab the desk. Oh, I have a book like way over here I want to show off too. Cool. Grab the camera again, set some more keyframes, and go up to, let's say, 45. Deselect that. Oh, gotta show off the chair. That's a good shot for the chair. Show off the monkey. So I grab that monkey picture. 90. It's adorable. Come on, spin around. There you go. camera again, set some keyframes. And then you realize, oh, I didn't show off that thing. All right, well, I'll just go back maybe here. There's plenty of room right there. I'll just click on that, hit O, click on my camera, set a key. Come on. All right, so this is our crazy camera. You're trying to show off every single piece of the scene. Okay, this is like bananas. This is nauseating. It's actually playing back slower than it would outside. This is only 3 seconds. So imagine all of this happening in 3 seconds. Okay, that's a crazy camera. This is an elegant camera. You're showing off the stuff you have. There's one, there's the other. That's all we need to do. Okay? Cool. Alright. So I'm going to delete this other camera because that's an ugly camera. And I'm going to go to my render settings again because now I'm ready to render my stuff out. So now I can say start at frame 1, go to frame 90. Okay, if you look at my timeline, well, 0, sorry. Maya starts at 1. Go to frame 0, then go to frame 90. That's going to be our animation. Shouldn't need to do anything else. Where is this going to save? There it is. Okay. It's going to go into my renders. I spelled that wrong, so I'll have to fix that later. And I'm going to call this Sarcona Miniroom. Now here's where, again, it gets a little bit tricky. When we render this out, it's going to render out one frame, one file per frame, right? So as it's naming each one of those files, we have to know how it's going to do that, okay? So under the naming convention, this is what we want to choose, the very bottom one, name.number.extension. That's what that does. So what this will tell After Effects when we take this into After Effects is here's the name of my project, so Sarcona Miniroom. Here's the number, which is the frame, and then here's the kind of file that it is. Okay? So don't render out anything else except for TIFF. That's what we want to do for this one. Leave it at the bottom one. That should be good there. All that should be good. Awesome. I'm going to go to anti-aliasing and just set this to best. Okay? This will clean up some of the edges, so it's going to take a little bit longer to render, but it'll look nicer. Okay? So all that we've changed in here is our resolution, our start and end frame right before we're ready to render, where we're saving it to, the name.number.extension, and then our anti-aliasing we set to best. Okay? Every time we render in After Effects, those 3 things we will be setting. Okay? So that will be a continuous loop of processes that we do. Down here under multipath or effect, just so you can see it, here's a bunch of other stuff that we could, we're not going to do it for this one, we could add to this to make it look more realistic. Things like depth of field, right? If you had a real camera and you took a picture of something up close and the other stuff is blurred out, that's depth of field. It makes things look more realistic. We also have lens distortion, so we could actually distort the stuff inside of our view. We can have stuff glowing. We can do cell rendering, which is like cartoony stuff. We can do caustics. A whole bunch of stuff that we could do in there. Eventually we'll get more into those things. Cool. So now I'm ready to render. So I just go to my render, add to render queue. Yes, I should probably save this. And then I say go. Alright, so now what this is going to do is it's going to go to each frame, and you can see it happening right here. It's going to each frame and rendering out each frame. Right now it's on frame 3. Now it's on frame 4. Now it's on frame 5. Okay? As I watch that, I can see in my renders folder, it's populating a new image every single time. Notice the image name 0000, 0001, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay? So every time we get a new file, it's going to name it with that thing. That way After Effects will know, here's the order that these are supposed to go in, right? Otherwise it wouldn't know what order to put them And then just so we have it completed in this video so you can have it all as one, I'm going to show you the final step, which is then taking that and putting it into After Effects. Okay? The After Effects part is like the simplest part. Alright, so this is After Effects. Who has not used After Effects before? Okay, won't be a big deal. Just close this. So here's my project. Here's my import window. So I just double click down here. And I go and find my footage. Here, there. Okay. Now, you want to wait until all of yours are done. All of mine aren't done yet, but just for the sake of the video, I'm just going to grab these anyway. Okay? It'll automatically find the rest of them when you do it. You don't click on all of these, you click on only one. So don't grab all the images, just grab one image and import it.
Doesn't matter which image, or
Nope.
which you want to start
It doesn't matter because the second you click on one of those, it'll see that there's a number and it'll start off at the beginning and go to the end. Okay. So here's my sequence. Now I just drag this down here. I can watch it, make sure it rendered out. Some common things that happen is cinema. Maybe the camera wasn't selected. Okay. I was already in my camera. It was already my default. Sometimes you have to change that. So if you render it out and you see, oh, my camera's not moving, go back, make sure you pick the right camera, and then render it again. You drag it down here, and then you just go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. So we added to a render queue inside of Cinema. We're adding to a render queue inside of After Effects. We click on the word lossless, and we're going to make this into a QuickTime movie. If you look at your cheat sheet again, there is a format option. What format option does it say for it? H.264. I do not have H.264 listed because if you look at my settings here, I do not have QuickTime installed on my computer. Okay, so if you go home and you're working in QuickTime or After Effects or whatever and you don't see that option, install QuickTime. I'm not going to do it now, I'll just pick a different one. But you will come into here once you installed QuickTime and you'll use H.264. I'm just going to use the GoPro one. That'll work. Okay? You don't typically have to set any other options. That one should be fine. There's no audio for this, so we don't have to worry about that. We click on the output to, and then this is going to be our actual file. This is going to be our movie that we could then upload or show someone or whatever. So I'm going to put this inside of my final Sarcona Miniroom. Perfect. And then I hit this render button. That's how quick it'll take. Okay? In Cinema, it has to calculate the lights, the shadows, the objects, the textures, all this stuff. It's giving you a flat image. After Effects is just taking those flat images and making it into a movie. So that process goes super quick. Okay? And just so you can see how quick that goes without me blabbering, there it is. Okay, so you see how fast that process is going to go. So don't worry about the After Effects stuff. It's minimal. And again, those 3 steps we're going to use like every time. Alright, and you'll see that Cinema is actually done with my rendering. Okay, so these things won't take long to render out of Cinema. So we get a break on the first one. The next one will take longer. The next one after that will take longer. I'm going to save this. Close it. Alright, so now if we look, I have all of my rendered images right here. I have my folder that has all my stuff in it. Cool. So when yours is done, then that project's done. Okay. Next week, I'll go through and I'll sit with you when yours is done and we'll go through and grade these, okay? So while you're working on the next project, I'll be grading these projects, just walking around and checking them out, okay? So the idea with today is that you get to that point, okay? Even if it doesn't finish rendering today, if you had to come in next time and take 5 minutes, bring it in After Effects and render it out, that's how long it would take, okay? So the idea is to make sure you get to the rendering stage today. Okay, I'm not expecting your scenes. I don't know why I closed that. I'm not expecting your scenes to have like loads of stuff in it. I want to see the desk. I want to see the chair. I want to see the bookcase. And then I want to see a few different items that you've added to the room. Make sure everything has color to it. Make sure everything is organized. All of these things down here, all the textures should have names to them. All the items here should have names to them. All of your items should be on layers, so that basically I'm going to go through when I check this, make sure everything has names, and then also make sure that I could turn off the visibility and not see anything else in the scene. Like right now, none of these are on layers. Those need to be on layers. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way we can just like do a rendering process today and then go home and like work on it more?
You can, but if you're gonna work on it more, don't do the rendering process yet.
Don't do it yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you're gonna work on it, I'll send out those codes
I need more time.
maybe today, tomorrow morning. I should be able to send out those codes so that you can get at least 18. When you go to 18, you will not be able to go back to 17. Okay? So if you do work at home on 18, just make sure that you're working on it just to practice the skills, and then here you're actually building the stuff. Okay? Or you're building these and taking it into 18, whatever way you want to handle that. But do just one or the other for the projects. Don't try to do both. I can give you 18 now so you can play with it, so you can have the practice with the tools. When 19 comes out, I'll send out the 19 codes, and then I'll give you, we'll install 19 in the classroom too. Okay? Or just don't install 18 at home and just wait for it.
There's no like back saving or anything so we can work on it today?
I don't believe so. Save as... No, there's no. Nope. Yeah. It's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
These programs. There's other ways around it. We could... Here's the cool thing about 3D. So every single one of these items is like an object. It's an asset. Okay? So these things here, they exist as pieces of geometry, pieces of mathematical data. I can take those pieces of data and I can export them out to anything that can be read by programs like 10 years ago. Okay? So let's say that I really like this desk or this bookcase, but I modeled it in 18, but I want to use it in my 17 project. Okay? I can go to File and say Export and choose one of these formats here. Now, for what we're doing, you would want to export it out as probably an OBJ or an FBX. Okay? And then once you export it out as an OBJ or FBX from like 18, then you can come into 17 and import that OBJ or FBX.
You just have to like reposition it basically?
Yeah, you may have to reposition it. Some things will not go with it. Okay? So if we look at my chair here, remember when I added that little smooth thing to it? Okay? That smooth thing wouldn't come along with it. I would get basically the flattened out version of that chair. Okay? So it's acceptable, especially now. When we get to the next assignment, everything is basically one big project, so you can't do it with that one. But you can definitely play around with some of the tools with that. Okay? So the next assignment will have like little pieces of tools that we're like adding to one piece, to one item. So you'll see how that all comes together. But that'll be next week. Okay? So that's another way you could do it. All right? Anything else? All right, cool.